The fantasy season has officially come to a close, and hopefully you won a couple of ships so you can help fill that void left until draft season. So let's rapid fire recap the entire season by every team, starting with the Atlanta Falcons, or should I say Arthur Smith. A man who answers the question, what if Tilda Swinton had an affair with Mr. Potato Head? How do you not use 3 top 10 picks on offense? And then you've never scored 30 points in a game. It's only fitting that he ends the season crying. And thank God he was fired, because I've never seen the fantasy community more united. And I believe we would have went full January 6th on Mercedes-Benz Stadium if he wasn't out of there by Monday. The Arizona Cardinals greatly surpassed expectations, and they finished the season with a win over the team that wanted to fire their current head coach while he's defensive coordinator. Even more fitting when you consider just how bad the Eagles' defense was, but I digress. Kyler Murray came back with a whisper, and we lost Marquise Brown both in spirit and then later in body. This team is a mystery box in 2024, and they could be in position to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. or re-rolling for another QB if they decide to trade Kyler. Speaking of trades, remember when the Ravens were deciding if Lamar Jackson was worth the money that he was asking for?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
What an absolute ridiculous discourse that escalated into an actual analyst asking if Lamar Jackson was quarterbacky enough. Well, after they yeeted Greg Roman for Todd Markin, brought in OBJ, drafted Zay Flowers, and then Rashad Bateman came back for dead, I think it's safe to say that Lamar Jackson is still very much quarterbacky and still very much the MVP. It's safe to say that the term quarterbacky wouldn't be around if we wouldn't punish players for just being athletic. Or, as I'd like to call it, just being a little too blunt. But I don't really have time to open up that can of worms, and instead I'd like to draw attention to the Buffalo Bills. Do they suck all of a sudden? Firing Ken Dorsey obviously helped, but when your defensive-minded head coach trots out a defense that gives up 20 points to the awful New England Patriots, not once, but twice, you'll have to wonder if Coach Bill Burr is going to keep his job after the playoffs. Which brings me to the Panthers. They should just fire the whole franchise, especially after trading their 2024 first overall pick for their 2023 first overall pick, and they ended up having the first overall pick again. And they're worse off than last year. It's almost impossible to tell if Bryce Young sucks since he's surrounded by a terrible offensive line and the ghost of Adam Thielen and absolutely no one else. What more can I say but a big yikes for me, dog, and a congrats to the Bears, because once again they're at the center of offseason debate. Your opinion of Justin Fields likely directly correlates to whether or not you like the Barbie movie.
Hi Barbie. Hi Barbie. Hi Barbie. Hi Barbie.
And the spreadsheet boasts feel a little silly for fading a player that's produced with Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, non-Bucks Baker Mayfield, and Teddy Bridgewater. Yes, I'm talking about DJ Moore. Again, we bet on talent, not situation. The situation tends to adjust itself to the talent. Now, the Bears are a questionable team to say adjusting the situation, but he's still produced in a big way. Now, let's lament about the Bengals' lost season. Joe Burrow was one of the many casualties in the bloodbath that was the 2023 season. It's even a bigger disappointment when you have to consider that we had to watch him hobble around for the first 4 weeks while he was recovering from the first injury. Then the second injury, Jake Browning comes back in there and then goes on this crazy insanity run. Won't be the first time I'm saying that. And that run was great until we needed him and Jamar Chase most in the fantasy playoffs, RIP to most of our seasons. And 2023 is going to be known as the year of the discount Bengal. Also, Chase Brown might be okay. Imagine Marvel's What If, except the Browns don't overpay for Deshaun Watson and just bring in Joe Flacco for much cheaper all along, because Uncle Grandpa has been balling. Turns out you need very little out of your QB when you're the Browns. Just get the ball to Amari Cooper and David Njoku, because that defense has been cooking through folks like Hulk was on that one planet in Thor Ragnarok.
Another day, another Doug.
Are the Cowboys actually dim boys this year? Because they actually look in position to win a playoff game. And a lot of that comes thanks to the QB that most of their fan base thought was washed and wanted gone a year ago. And then a wide receiver that many fantasy analysts said was a fake alpha. If there's one thing I did learn from Twitter in 2023, it's that nobody knows what the term woke, alpha, and stand on business means. But for some reason, everyone loves just throwing those terms around.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It was a good year for the boys' passing game, but disappointment if you drafted Tony Pollard, who is now the new C, both in role and in disappointment. As a Colorado resident that is forced to listen about their teams, I really want Denver to stop being mediocre. Don't know when that's going to stop though. Sean Payton begrudgingly let Russell Wilson cook, but not in a chef type way, more like a prepackaged meal from Trader Joe's. It tastes super duper okay and will get the job done, but is apparently overpriced, because they benched Mr. Unlimited after asking him to take a pay cut. Filed Denver under Y for yikes. Don't look, Bears fans, the Packers may have another Hall of Famer at quarterback.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
Jordan Love is pretty good, and they've got the youngest roster to ever make the playoffs. And that starts with a young wide receiver core, Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, and maybe Christian Watson if he gathers all the Dragon Balls and wishes for new hamstrings. The future of this team and offense is excellent for fantasy managers, and then a doom for the entire state of Illinois. It's wild to think that the Panthers could have had both CJ Stroud and Tank Dell, because the Texans looked just fine and they didn't have to sacrifice their firstborn sons to the Bears. CJ Stroud is already a top 5 QB, and Nico Collins and Tank Dell look both like top 36 wide receivers for the foreseeable future. And we haven't even mentioned Will Anderson, which they got with their second pick, who's on the other side of the ball. This team looks stacked.
What a crop!
That's a big crop.
Imagine what the Colts would look like if both Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor were healthy throughout the entire season. Michael Pittman Jr. proved that he didn't suck, and just the carousel of geriatric QBs that came in before 2023 did. Shane Steichen has proven that he's a real deal, and if you need further proof, just look at the Eagles, whose offense collapsed as soon as he left. I have no clue why Jacksonville isn't better. The Calvin Ridley comeback was only a myth for the first 6 weeks, and then the coaching staff showed to the entire world that Zay Jones is suddenly the reason why that offense can work. Between questionable play calls and questionable throws, we have ourselves a real chicken and egg scenario of why this offense is bad, except in this case, the egg is a turd and the chicken is an ass. The Kansas City Chiefs are learning that you need more than just old man Kelsey and then 3 trash cans with arms for wide receiver targets, even for Patrick Mahomes. Thank God Rashee Rice came on late after the Chiefs were done experimenting if Marquise Valdes-Scantling was indeed as terrible as we all thought he was. Fun fact, he is. They obviously are still a threat, but anyone who paid for Mahomes or Kelsey in fantasy is likely eating that regretty spaghetti. After a timeline of embarrassing himself with the Broncos, going back to the Pats, then accepting a job with the Colts only to renege and then go back to the Pats, seems like Josh McDaniel is done being a head coach after being fired by the Las Vegas Raiders. Unless Bill Belichick brings his annoying friend that nobody likes to whatever party that he's invited to next, he's probably only welcome in Canada.
Learn French?
Meanwhile, Antonio Pierce took over and he looks like the guy going forward, even though that Aiden O'Connell is still the projected quarterback. I really don't know what this team's going to look like going into the future, and I'm glad I'm not a Raiders fan or a Chargers fan, because apparently everyone thinks that Justin Herbert sucks, even though he's had a Brandon Staley-shaped weight around his neck for the majority of his career. Not to mention losing Mike Williams and having to deal with the Temu or Sheehan version that is Quentin Johnston. He's unbreathable polyester with crooked or unfinished seams. That joke might be for a different demographic, but you get it. Anyway, after he went down with injury and then we watched a defensive-minded head coach get blown out by both a backup QB and a backup coach should tell us enough. Justin Herbert is obviously not the problem, but here we are.
I'm in trouble.
It's a good time to be a Rams fan. Matthew Stafford came back from off-season death, and they got their next Cooper Kupp on day 3 in Puka Nacua. And apparently Kyron Williams is the second coming of Todd Gurley. Who would have thought?
Not me.
Watching this team outperform expectations has been like watching Jake Paul's fighting career. It seems like a joke until you realize that they might be the real deal. And then back to real deal, we can't forget about Tua Tagovailoa's MVP run at the beginning of the season. Tua, Purdy, and Jordan Love are basically just different parts of the CSI franchise, but just for Shanahan's system. Obviously Tua CSI Miami. But it helps when your coach is Einstein with the confidence and personality of Ryan Reynolds. Not to mention that me included and every other BMI bro were definitely wrong about Devon Achane, since every time he touched the ball he damn near scored.
The boy got some slave feet.
Even if the end of the season is disappointing, the future for this team is bright. Now the future for Minnesota is a little bit murkier after they lost Kirk Cousins for the season and again missed the playoffs. The Vikings went through their own insanity run with the Pastronaut, and that had some of their fan base even shaving their eyebrows. Forgot to mention Justin Jefferson and how we were robbed of another historic season. But that did give way for his Scottie Pippen and Jordan Addison to have a good rookie season. Even more so, Brian Flores has that defense cooking. So even if we can just get good Kirk Cousins or better than the backups that we've seen, this team could be really great. And maybe stop trying to make Alexander Madison a thing.
It's not going to happen.
The Patriots are officially beyond rebuild and are now a poverty franchise. Mac Jones is broken, and as a Patriots fan, my spirit is broken. There's nothing else to say but that hopefully Bill Belichick retires someplace nice, then they draft Drake May so the evil empire can die and the new republic can start. At least Pop Douglas is a thing. The New Orleans Saints are the new Raiders, meaning that they're still going to be mediocre until they stop believing in Derek Carr. And despite popular belief, Chris Olave is still pretty good. Again, Derek Carr. Shaheed's still really fast, and Taysom Hill's going to linger around like a fart in a hot car. On to the next team. The Giants lost Daniel Jones, but by those early box scores, did they ever really have him? We got our third Linsanity run with Tommy DeVito and his agent, who looks like if you typed in Italian person inside of a racist AI prompt. It kind of ended up in flames, and I doubt we'll see him starting in the future. So that leaves the Giants left with Daniel Jones, or they could trade him and trade up for a QB who will still have 5 undersized slots and a tight end who doesn't want to be there as weapons. And the turd nugget that tops this Dookie Sunday is that their very good defensive coordinator decided to resign. And despite all that, they're still only the second most embarrassing team in New York. But before that, let's talk about the Eagles. And remember how we talked about them sucking earlier? Clearly Sirianni is much better at picking offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators to bail him out, because now that those crutches are gone, he kind of looks like a fraud. I hate what it's doing to my fantasy teams, but I do love seeing the city of Philadelphia suffer.
The world
Maybe we should stop punishing Brock Purdy for getting the ball to his playmakers, because I would have sacrificed my cat to get Desmond Ridder to do that for Kyle Pitts and Drake London. The 49ers are the clear NFC favorites, and it's hard to find much to complain about. What I will complain about is on my fantasy rosters I got carved up by CMC in the playoffs, but I won't go down that path. In an unsurprising coach firing, the Commanders fired Ron Rivera. Thanks to him, it's taken us a full season to realize that Sam Howell is definitely a 5th round pick who deserves to be a backup. You have Scary Terry and Jahan Dotson, yet the ghost of Logan Thomas has passed as the wide receiver 1 on this team for several weeks. Let's not forget that they've already yeeted both of their defensive ends are in a full rebuild mode. Seems like all of Dan Snyder's dirty sheets are officially being burned, and now it's a new era in Washington. Who seems to be in the same era despite an entire new team are the New York Jets, who look like a freaking disaster. And I think everybody knows why except Aaron Rodgers. Sure, he tore his Achilles in the first game of the season.
Killing spree.
But you would think this offense could do a little bit more since they had championship hopes, right? I mean, you would think that bringing over the same receivers and offensive coordinator from the franchise that you spent 2 years complaining never gave you help would do something, right?
Who can never be sure?
Extraordinary.